Welcome to the Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva, and today we're going to get some insight into becoming a lawyer after college. My guest today is Sindy Warren. She is an author and a lawyer, and welcome to the show.
Thank you, Anthony. It's so nice to be here.
Yeah, so I start my guests where they went to college. So where'd you go to school?
I went to Tufts in Boston.
Great. So let's just go back in time a little. Tell me, in high school, when did you start thinking about going to college? Was it freshman year, senior year? How did it all begin for you, and why did you end up picking Tufts?
I always knew I would go to college, like that was never a question. And I didn't really think about where, probably until I was a senior, which is kind of late because I now have a daughter who's a sophomore and was thinking about it for the last 10 years.
Okay.
I picked Tufts because I wanted to be in the Boston area where I have a lot of family, and I wanted a liberal arts school that was not too huge. So that was sort of one of the schools at the top of my list, and went up to visit and loved the environment, everything I saw from the social to the academic, and it was a really great fit.
So was it the only school you applied to, or did you have other schools?
I applied to about 4 or 5 other schools, but it was definitely my first choice.
Great. So now you're at Tufts University. What's the school like? Can you give a little example of the atmosphere and what the school is like?
Absolutely. Now, this is going back a ways, but when I was there, it's about 4,000. It's now maybe a little more than that, so 1,000 a class. It's a really beautiful campus that has a little bit of hilliness to it. It's not far from Boston, but it definitely has a little oasis kind of feel. So you're a couple of T stops away from the city or from Harvard Square, Cambridge. So it feels isolated, and yet you're close to a lot of things. And it's really aesthetically pleasing and not so big that you feel like you can't manage it. And by the end of my time there, I would walk around campus and know most of the people I saw, which felt homey.
Yeah. So now you graduate from Tufts University. How does one go from graduating from Tufts University to becoming an author and a lawyer?
Well, the lawyer came first by a couple of decades before the author. So I went right from Tufts to Stanford Law School in California, and hadn't always had a lifelong dream of becoming a lawyer. But really, truth be told, I loved being a student, and I wasn't quite ready to not be a student. So I applied to law school. And Stanford was a 3-year experience. And right after that, I got into the big law firm deal, which is kind of what you have to do if you've paid for law school with loans, which is what I did 100%. So I went right from Tufts to Stanford to working at a big law firm in San Francisco. I'm now actually in Cleveland, Ohio, and my career has shifted a lot in the last decade and a half. But in the beginning years of my life as a lawyer, I was doing the big law firm thing where first you're a first year in law school, and then you're a second year, not law school, in the law firm, and it just sort of progresses like a step ladder, like you do in school.
Right.
And I loved it. I learned a lot, and I found a little niche area which ended up turning into an entire career for me and branching off. So my field of law is employment law, and I don't think you need to go into law school knowing what your field will be. But for me, developing that specialty made the whole world of law seem a little more accessible. Like I could potentially someday master this specialty, and I really enjoyed the subject matter. So it sort of fell into place that way. It wasn't that I went to Tufts thinking I want to be an employment lawyer someday.
And how did the author come about?
Many years later, I now don't actually technically practice law. I have a consulting business where, sort of jumping off my work as an employment lawyer, I now do human resources consulting. So I help companies and organizations comply with employment laws, have good employee relations, and have positive working environments where they're less likely to get sued. So that's sort of my business now. The book came about through a passion I developed as a young working lawyer, which is that of a yogi. So I practice yoga, and started doing that about 15 years ago, well into my career. Became extremely passionate about it. I'm now a yoga and meditation teacher as well as a lawyer. And so
Wow.
that's where I wrote a book about the sort of philosophical underpinnings of yoga. And it came out a few months ago.
So that gives me a lot of questions and a lot of different avenues to take. So let's just go into lawyer first.
Yeah.
In college, what type of classes are students taking to become a lawyer? And is there a lot of testing that goes on?
So most people in college who are heading to law school tend to take classes that are political in nature, political science, economics, things like that. However, I think you could absolutely just do a straight up liberal arts education before law school because law school is intensely specialized. So personally, I was a psychology major and I took a lot of advanced Spanish courses and I ended up taking a lot of courses in women's history and feminist theory and that sort of thing.
Okay.
And I think just sharpening your mind and your analytical skills in any endeavor is going to help you when you get to law school. In terms
So
of the testing, you asked
yes.
about testing. I mean, the LSAT, the lawyer version of the SAT, is really critical. And I am not naturally an excellent test taker. So I took a course before I took the LSAT, and it helped immensely. And I think it was because I took the course and then scored well on the LSAT that I got into the caliber of the school that I ended up going to.
So law school. When you're at law school, what are the type of classes you're taking, and what are the different avenues you can take as a lawyer? There's probably a lot of different types of avenues.
I think there are. Being a lawyer is as diverse as you can imagine. So in law school, you're going to have, at least for probably about half of your law school life, a period of set courses that you need to take. Basic contract law, civil procedure, basics of criminal law, constitutional law, all the basic areas of knowledge that enable a person to have the skills to become a lawyer. What law school really does is teaches you how to think and reason and write far more analytically than you would get in any kind of undergrad program. So in law school, again, I did not think, oh, I want to be an employment lawyer.
Sure.
I knew I thoroughly enjoyed the process of getting the education, and I knew I was going to try and get a job in a big law firm, at least for the first few years out of law school, to really hone my skills, to figure out what areas I felt passionate about, and to pay off my law school loans.
And that's a good problem to have, is to try to get the loans paid off. Absolutely.
Yes. Yes.
So when you're there, how does one choose from the many different avenues that you can take? Is it just because of the classes that you start taking, you start to figure out, oh, I'm better at this than something else?
I think that happens for some people. And when I reflect on what many of my classmates are doing, some of them are now judges, some of them are now professors. So if you were more, you just loved the academia of it all, that might be a route you would take. The judges were very into civil and criminal procedure. There are some people that go into business law and some people that go into litigation. Corporate law just never held any interest for me. So I ended up knowing that I wanted to be some kind of litigator. And litigation is just a field that means you're in some way, shape, or form connected to the court system.
Gotcha.
So most big firms will have a program for young lawyers where you sort of cycle through a rotation. I happened to get assigned to a partner my first year whose specialty was insurance defense. And it gave me just exposure to litigation in general, which you don't get the hands-on typically in law school. It's much more theory than practice. But I quickly decided that area really held no interest for me. And I sought out lawyers in the firm. It was a very large firm. It was like 300 lawyers in San Francisco at the time, who practiced employment law because it seemed interesting. And I had taken one employment law course, And for me, it seemed to be a much more personal experience. It wasn't just company fighting against company for some share of profits. It was people felt emotionally invested in something that happened to them in their professional lives.
Yeah.
So I enjoyed the subject matter. And so much of it is, I don't want to say luck or chance, but there is a little bit of, unless you know what your path is, you're going to have to figure it out as you go and see what really sparks your interest and your passion and what you happen to be good at. I would not have been a good mergers and acquisitions lawyer, for example. Some people would love that and be great at it. So in some ways, I figured out what I was interested in just by virtue of being in the environment where I could explore. And then I pursued that with all my heart.
Now, do you get your bar degree while you're in law school, or do you get it after you graduate and you're part of a company of some sort?
So law students take the bar exam typically the summer after law school. You can't take and pass the bar until you've graduated from law school. And then different states have different requirements. It's a very state-specific sort of thing.
Okay.
So in California, back in '96, which is when I graduated from law school, it was a 3-day exam. And there were hundreds of us sitting in a big hall for 8 hours a day, 3 days in a row.
Wow.
And yeah, the bar exam is a very intense experience, but it's not something that should dissuade anyone from going to law school because, like the LSAT, there are courses. So your law school will prepare you to varying degrees for the bar exam, and you can supplement that with courses.
Okay. Now, the bar exam itself, studying for the bar exam, is it like the SAT where they have 3 different segments? Do they focus on particular segments? What could you give the students that are looking into becoming a lawyer? What advice of or reference of what you can tell them that's on the exam, or sort of what's on the exam?
So I would differentiate. I think students who are in high school now shouldn't even think about the bar exam. They can think about the LSAT, which is in many parts like the SAT. The bar exam is its whole own unique animal where you're expected to have some level of mastery over almost all areas of law, which is unique because you don't then go out into the world and practice all areas of law.
Yeah.
It's a little bit of a cramming game. I memorized what I needed to know about securities law and then I promptly forgot it. So it's not anything to worry about if you're considering a career in law. It's something you'll experience, you'll move on, and you'll go on and have your career. So
now, when you're in the corporate world and working for a large law firm, what can students expect when they're coming out of law school? What can they expect in that first and second year of being a lawyer or so-called lawyer?
Right. And again, there's so many options, so you don't have to go the big law firm route. You could go into public service. You could go into being a public defender or a prosecutor at either the federal or the state level. But if one was to follow a similar path as mine, it's a little bit like drinking from a fire hose at first. You're getting so much information and experience, and some of it will land and a lot of it won't. And it's really a tremendous intellectual challenge. And even though professionally I've moved on from law firm life, my husband is now, he's still a litigator and really lives the litigator's life. It was invaluable to my intellectual growth.
So now you got into writing a book and yoga. Let's go into that a little bit. What's the book about? What's the title? Can people actually find it?
Yeah, the book is on Amazon. It's called Radiate, which is spelled R-A-D-I and the number 8, using the path of yoga to cultivate your inner shine. It's very unlawyerly. And the book is really sort of a modern yogi's take on the philosophy of yoga. So most people who practice yoga in America don't know that there's this underlying philosophy of which the physical postures are only 1/8. So my book is the entire 8-part path, 1 chapter per limb, as we yogis call them. And I found that writing the book is sort of a passion project that I didn't really write with even the goal of getting published. And, I was fortunate enough to get published, and it's been a real passion project. But I think that when I think about my whole path, it's like lawyer and yoga teacher seem so different.
Yeah.
But my skills in each area really complement the other. So I actually think I bring a personal sense of compassion to my clients because I've developed that through yoga. And I bring a level of intellectual acumen to yoga because I found that through law. So each enhances the other, even though they're quite different.
Yeah, and so yoga, when you're doing yoga, how does one get into doing something like that? Or was it just physical activity that you were looking for, and then you ended up doing yoga?
To begin with, it was absolutely, I heard it was a great workout, and it is. It also, because of the underlying philosophy, ends up being very relevant for developing skills like dealing with hard things in life, dealing with self-criticism, dealing with interpersonal conflict or professional conflict. Yoga is a philosophy, it's a life philosophy that really touches on every aspect of life. So while I was first drawn to the practice just for the sheer physicality, I ended up really falling in love with it for the mental benefits.
And now instructing others, do you have one location? Do you have multiple locations? Is it something where people can actually come and see you?
Yeah, so a couple things. So I, as I said, live in Cleveland, Ohio, and I work at a yoga studio in the area called Citizen Yoga. I don't really travel to teach. However, I am helping to lead a yoga retreat in Yellowstone Park this summer. So anyone that wanted to get sort of a 5-day immersive experience of yoga and meditation and the philosophy behind it all could definitely check that out.
And what's the meditation like? I mean, what does one go through to get to that level?
So meditation is something that anybody could sit down and for 30 seconds to 60 seconds focus on their breath or focus on a saying. And that is meditation. So mindfulness is sort of a skill we hear a lot about for not just for adults, but for teens and young adults and people of all walks of life. And I view it as a skill that just enables you to be a little more present and make really good choices as you move through your life. So it's something for everyone. And the techniques, there are many techniques, but at the most basic level, it's sitting comfortably, closing your eyes or not, and noticing your breath for a couple of beats. And that's it.
Interesting. How about the 8 segments of your book? Could you go through a little of the 8 segments? I mean, we don't want to get a whole detail of the 8 segments, but if you could just give us a little.
Yes, absolutely. So yoga really begins with ethics. There are the first 2 parts of the practice are ethics, first as you relate to the world around you, and then second as you relate to yourself. So yoga teaches that there are 2 main relationships that we as humans encounter. One is our relationship with the external world, including the people in it, and the other is our relationship with ourselves, which is something that we're not really taught in school or college or law school, how to cultivate a healthy, well-working relationship with ourselves. So yoga does a lot of that. Those are the first 2. Then there's the physical practice. There's also the breath work. So if anyone's ever been to a yoga class, breathing in time with your movement is very important. And controlling the breath is it's an entire part of the yoga practice. It's something that if for students listening who may experience stress from time to time, if you were to just sit down and close your eyes and lengthen your spine and take a deep breath in through your nose and a long breath out through your nose and do that 3 to 5 times, you would actually notice a shift in how you feel because your nervous system is being manipulated in a very healthy way.
Wow.
So breath work is an antidote to stress, actually, to the cortisol that the fight or flight mode puts many students and professionals into.
Wow.
So breath work. And then the other four limbs all really relate to meditation, which is just a tremendously important part of the practice. So there's this idea of drawing yourself, still being in the world and being a good, productive member of society, but relying on yourself more. So having first a solid foundation with who you are and what you're doing before you take that into the world. And meditation helps with that a lot. It also, for those that might be more just achievement oriented, helps with problem solving and creativity and helping us get into that really good flow state where we're churning out good ideas and that sort of thing.
Wow.
Yeah, it's been really amazing.
So the classes, there's a lot of different types of yogas that are out there, right?
Many.
What are some of them that people take?
I teach a flow style of yoga called vinyasa, which is very popular these days. I would say vinyasa yoga, people have probably heard of hot yoga or Bikram yoga. That's another popular one. I encourage people that have any interest in yoga to just look at your neighborhood studio. Yoga studios are everywhere these days, and see what appeals to you. I really love the flowing kind of yoga where you match breath with movement, and there's some music and it's guided, and there's some good like philosophical messaging. So it's kind of a whole body and mind experience for an hour that you take out of your day just for yourself. But yeah, there are many yoga out there.
So now students that are in high school and in college, they have a lot of stress on them, just school-wise. What can they do with yoga that can maybe relieve some of that at the high school level, at the college level? Because there's probably a lot going on.
There is. So I have so many students who are high schoolers, even more than college age. We're actually running a teacher training right now, and one of our teacher trainees is a 16-year-old who's just really interested in yoga and meditation and philosophy and applying that to her life. And I think it helps a lot with stress. So stress is really the mind being agitated by moving to the past and to the future. So worrying about what's next, or being afraid you can't get everything done, or not knowing how to do something. That's all mental agitation. And yoga and meditation both really work at teaching the practitioner to be in the present moment, which seems counterintuitive. Like, why would I want to be in the present moment when I really do want to plan for my future? But being in the present moment makes the planning so much more effective, because when we get out of that worry mode, we actually are better at problem solving and clear thinking.
And do you see students doing more yoga before tests?
I think they should. I'm not sure I noticed that. The high school students that I see, it's a regular part of their practice. The other thing about yoga is, for a lot of student athletes, it's really great cross-training. So if you're a runner, for example, that's so much contraction of the physical body. And yoga provides a level of expansion that really balances it all out. So it's not just the mental, there's also a tremendous physical component as well that's really beneficial.
Now, students always look for financial need at the college level. If they're looking into going to be a lawyer, the costs have to be pretty high. Is that correct?
To going to law school?
Yeah, both college and law school.
Yes, it's expensive. On the other hand, it's a good way to make a living. I mean, I've been, even with my consulting business now, I've sort of gotten off that fast track law firm life, and you can charge a really good hourly rate or project rate and that sort of thing. So being a lawyer is definitely the more lucrative part of my life. Great. As opposed to being a teacher.
Good. Well, we're coming to the end of our show, and usually I ask my guests what advice they want to give to the students that are looking into becoming lawyers at the college level. So what advice do you want to give them?
I've got to combine my two passions here, I think, Anthony. So I think having some sort of contemplative practice where, as an individual, the student sits down and gets quiet and really listens to what he or she wants out of their professional life and why. Getting clear on that, I think, is very helpful. It also helps a lot with motivation. And then take it day by day. Try and enjoy the present moment you're in, whether it's high school or college or applying to law school, and savor the experience, because I promise you, you will learn something every step of the way. And failure, which I like to put in quotes, is a part of life. So you may not get in exactly where you think you have to go to be happy. And you'll learn that you're resilient and you're strong, and that happiness and contentment is really more of an inside job.
Great. Well, thank you very much for coming on the show, Sindy. I appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, so you've been watching The Secrets of College Planning. I'm your host, Anthony Uva. Until next time.